The gleaming showroom floor of Beverly Hills' most exclusive Ferrari dealership fell silent as the automatic doors slid open on that crisp February morning in 2025. What happened next would become one of the most shocking incidents of racial discrimination in recent memory, involving one of the world's most recognizable athletes and a store owner whose prejudice would cost him everything. This wasn't just another case of mistaken identity. This was a collision between ignorance and greatness that would expose the ugly truth about how bias can blind us to the extraordinary people standing right in front of us. The morning had started, like any other in the affluent enclave of Beverly Hills, where million-dollar homes lined quiet streets and luxury vehicles occupied every driveway. The sun cast golden rays across Wilshire Boulevard, illuminating the impressive glass facade of Thompson Ferrari, one of the most prestigious automotive dealerships on the entire West Coast. Inside, rows of pristine Italian supercars gleamed. Under carefully positioned LED lighting, each vehicle representing the pinnacle of automotive engineering and design excellence. Marcus Thompson had built his empire over 2 decades, transforming what had once been a modest used car lot into the premier destination for Ferrari enthusiasts throughout Southern California. His clientele read like a who's who of Hollywood royalty, tech billionaires, and professional athletes, or so he claimed. The dealership's walls were adorned with photographs of celebrities posing with their new purchases, creating an atmosphere that suggested exclusivity and prestige. At 52 years old, Thompson prided himself on his ability to identify serious buyers from casual browsers. He had developed what he considered to be an infallible instinct for recognizing people who belonged in his establishment versus those who were simply wasting his time. This morning, that instinct would fail him in the most spectacular and public way imaginable. LeBron Raymond James, the king himself, stepped through those automatic doors with no intention of making headlines. He was simply a man who had worked his entire life to reach a level where he could afford the finest things, now seeking to purchase a dream car he had admired since childhood. At 40 years old, the Los Angeles Lakers superstar had achieved everything possible in basketball: 4 NBA championships, 4 Finals MVP awards, 4 regular season MVP awards, and Olympic gold medals. His on-court accomplishments had translated into business success, making him one of the wealthiest athletes in history with a net worth exceeding $1 billion. But what should have been a celebration of success became a nightmare of humiliation that would shake the luxury retail world to its core. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors as exotic cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars gleamed under the showroom lights. This was supposed to be a place where dreams came true for those who had earned their place among the elite. Instead, it became the setting for a confrontation that would reveal just how far we still have to go in the fight against racial prejudice. The irony was almost too painful to comprehend. Here was a man who had made his fortune partly by selling cars to successful black athletes, yet he couldn't recognize the greatest among them standing in his own showroom. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. 2 men from completely different worlds were about to collide in a moment that would define not just their own lives, but spark a national conversation about racism, respect, and the assumptions we make about people based solely on the color of their skin. The morning air was crisp with possibility, but within minutes, that possibility would transform into something much darker and more complex. This was a story that would be told and retold across social media platforms, news networks, and dinner tables throughout America, serving as both a cautionary tale about the persistence of racism and an inspiring example of how dignity and grace can triumph over ignorance and prejudice. Beverly Hills hummed with its usual morning energy as the city's most affluent residents began their day in the exclusive enclave where luxury was not just a lifestyle, but an expectation. The Ferrari dealership sat prominently on Wilshire Boulevard, its glass facade reflecting the California sunshine that promised another perfect day in paradise. The building itself was an architectural masterpiece, designed to complement the artistic excellence of the vehicles it housed, with clean lines and modern aesthetics that spoke to sophisticated sensibilities. Inside, the showroom represented the pinnacle of automotive luxury, row after row of pristine vehicles that most people could only dream of owning. Each Ferrari was positioned with mathematical precision, creating sightlines that drew customers deeper into the space and showcased every curve and detail of the Italian masterpieces. The polished concrete floors reflected the overhead lighting like mirrors, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that made the cars appear to float in space. Marcus Thompson arrived at his dealership earlier than usual that February morning, his mind focused on the month's sales figures and the pressure to maintain his position as the top Ferrari dealer on the West Coast. The luxury automotive market was intensely competitive, with dealers constantly vying for the attention of ultra-wealthy clients who had virtually unlimited options for their purchasing decisions. Thompson had built his reputation on providing not just vehicles, but experiences, making his customers feel like they were joining an exclusive club rather than simply making a transaction. The showroom itself was a carefully curated environment, designed to appeal to the ultra-wealthy. The walls displayed racing memorabilia from Formula One events, vintage photographs of classic Ferrari models, and images of celebrities posing with their new purchases. Every detail had been planned to create an atmosphere of exclusivity and prestige, from the Italian marble accents to the custom leather seating areas where customers could relax while discussing their purchases. Thompson's staff began arriving for their morning briefing, a daily ritual where sales strategies were discussed and targets were set. The team consisted of 8 highly trained sales associates, each one carefully selected for their ability to connect with the ultra-wealthy clientele who frequented the showroom. They dressed impeccably in tailored suits and designer accessories, spoke multiple languages to accommodate international buyers, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of every vehicle specification, from horsepower and torque figures to interior customization options. The sales associates had been trained to identify potential buyers within seconds of their arrival, reading subtle cues about clothing, accessories, and body language to determine who deserved immediate attention and who could be politely ignored. This profiling system had served the dealership well over the years, allowing the staff to focus their efforts on serious buyers while avoiding time wasters who had no intention of making a purchase. As the morning progressed, the showroom began to fill with its usual mix of browsers and serious buyers. Wealthy entrepreneurs examined the latest models, their fingers tracing the curves of handcrafted Italian engineering while discussing performance specifications and customization options. The sound of expensive shoes on polished floors mixed with hushed conversations about horsepower, torque, and acceleration figures that would make most cars seem pedestrian by comparison. The atmosphere was sophisticated and refined, with classical music playing softly in the background and the aroma of expensive coffee wafting from the customer lounge. Everything had been designed to make wealthy clients feel comfortable and valued, creating an environment where 6-figure purchases seemed not just reasonable but inevitable. But beneath the veneer of sophistication and success, old prejudices lurked like shadows waiting for the right moment to emerge. The morning was about to take a turn that none of them could have anticipated, setting the stage for a confrontation that would expose the ugly truth about assumptions, privilege, and the price of ignorance in a world where appearances could be deceiving. LeBron James pulled into the dealership's parking lot behind the wheel of his understated black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, choosing to keep a low profile rather than arrive in one of his more attention-grabbing vehicles. The decision was deliberate. He had learned over his 2 decades in the public eye that sometimes the most productive interactions happened when people didn't immediately recognize him as one of the world's most famous athletes. This morning, he wanted to experience the dealership as a regular customer, to see how he would be treated based solely on his appearance and demeanor rather than his celebrity status. At 40 years old, the Los Angeles Lakers superstar had learned the value of discretion, especially when conducting personal business. He wore simple dark jeans that fit his 6'6" frame perfectly, a plain white t-shirt that emphasized his athletic build, and a black baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, the uniform of someone trying to blend in rather than make a statement. The casual attire was comfortable and practical, but it would prove to be the catalyst for the discrimination he was about to face. The decision to visit the Ferrari dealership hadn't been made lightly. LeBron had been considering purchasing a vintage Ferrari for months, something classic that would complement his growing collection of luxury vehicles. As someone who had worked his way up from the streets of Akron, Ohio, to become one of the highest-paid athletes in the world, he understood the significance of such a purchase. It represented more than just transportation. It was a symbol of how far he had come, a tangible reminder of the dreams he had achieved through dedication, hard work, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. His collection already included several impressive vehicles: a customized Lamborghini Aventador, a vintage Porsche 911, and a limited edition McLaren 765 LT. But a Ferrari would be something special, representing not just automotive excellence, but a connection to the racing heritage and Italian craftsmanship that had captivated him since childhood. He had specific models in mind, perhaps a classic Ferrari 250 GTO or a more modern 812 Superfast, vehicles that combined historical significance with contemporary performance. Standing 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighing 250 pounds, LeBron commanded attention wherever he went, even when dressed casually. His athletic build and confident demeanor were impossible to disguise completely, but the baseball cap and sunglasses provided enough anonymity for him to move through public spaces without being immediately recognized by everyone he encountered. The casual attire also reflected his genuine personality. Despite his wealth and fame, he remained connected to his humble beginnings and preferred comfort over ostentation in his daily life. As he approached the dealership's entrance, LeBron reflected on the morning's schedule. He had about an hour before his next commitment, a meeting with his production company about an upcoming documentary project. Plenty of time to browse the inventory and perhaps test drive a vehicle or two. His wife, Savannah, had encouraged him to treat himself, reminding him that after nearly 2 decades of professional basketball, he had earned the right to enjoy the fruits of his labor. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, and LeBron stepped into the climate-controlled environment of luxury and sophistication. The showroom's ambiance immediately impressed him. This was clearly a place that took pride in presentation and attention to detail. The cars gleamed under perfect lighting, each one positioned to showcase its best angles and most attractive features. The smell of fine leather and polished metal filled the air, creating a sensory experience that complemented the visual spectacle. But as LeBron began to walk among the displays, he noticed something that made him pause. The sales staff, who had been animated and attentive with other customers, seemed to avoid making eye contact with him. Their body language shifted subtly, becoming more guarded and less welcoming. It was a feeling he had experienced before, a subtle form of discrimination that many successful Black Americans knew all too well. The assumption that regardless of their actual circumstances, They didn't belong in spaces of luxury and privilege. Marcus. Thompson stood near the back of the showroom, reviewing inventory reports on his tablet, when he noticed the new arrival through his peripheral vision. His eyes immediately fixed on the tall black man in casual clothing who was walking slowly among the Ferraris, occasionally stopping to examine specific models more closely. Thompson's expression hardened as he watched, his prejudices immediately activated by assumptions about who belonged in his exclusive establishment. The dealer's thought process was unfortunately typical of the unconscious bias that plagued many luxury retail environments. In Thompson's mind, serious Ferrari buyers presented themselves in specific ways: expensive suits, luxury watches, confident demeanor that suggested familiarity with high-end purchases. The man in jeans and a baseball cap didn't fit that profile, and Thompson's years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts about potential customers, even when those instincts were fundamentally flawed. "Sarah," Thompson called to his lead sales associate, a polished blonde woman in her 30s who had been with the company for 5 years. Sarah Martinez was one of his most successful salespeople, with an impressive track record of closing deals with high-net-worth individuals. She had earned her position through hard work and genuine expertise about Ferrari vehicles, but she had also learned to navigate the sometimes problematic attitudes of her employer. "Do you see that gentleman over there? Keep an eye on him. Make sure he doesn't touch anything." Sarah looked in the direction her boss indicated, observing LeBron as he studied a pristine red Ferrari 812 Superfast. The vehicle was worth over $300,000 and represented one of Ferrari's most advanced models, with a twin-turbo V12 engine capable of producing 798 horsepower. LeBron was examining the car with obvious appreciation for its engineering excellence, his posture and attention to detail suggesting genuine interest rather than casual browsing. "Sir, he seems genuinely interested in the vehicles," Sarah replied, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty about her boss's instructions. "Perhaps I should approach him and see if he has any questions. He's been looking at the 812 for several minutes now, and his body language suggests he might be a serious buyer." Thompson shook his head firmly, his prejudices overriding any potential business considerations. "No, absolutely not. Look at how he's dressed. This isn't the type of clientele we cater to. He's probably just here to waste our time, maybe take some photos for social media. These people always think they can afford what they clearly can't." The phrase, "these people," hung in the air between them, its implications clear, despite Thompson's attempt to disguise his racism behind concerns about business efficiency. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the instruction, but wasn't sure how to challenge her boss directly. The dealership's culture had always prioritized sales numbers over social consciousness, and speaking up against Thompson's decisions was rarely welcomed or rewarded. The conversation wasn't entirely private, and several other staff members overheard their boss's instructions. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing the problematic nature of Thompson's assumptions, but none felt comfortable challenging their employer directly. The power dynamics in the workplace made it difficult for employees to speak up against discriminatory behavior, especially when it came from the owner himself. Meanwhile, LeBron continued his exploration of the showroom, his trained eye appreciating the craftsmanship and engineering excellence displayed before him. Each Ferrari represented hundreds of hours of skilled labor, from the hand-stitched leather interiors to the precision-engineered engines that delivered incredible performance. As someone who had dedicated his life to pursuing excellence in his own field, LeBron could appreciate the dedication and skill that went into creating these automotive masterpieces. He paused at a classic 1995 Ferrari 512M, a stunning example of Ferrari's design philosophy during the 1990s. The car's aggressive styling and naturally aspirated V12 engine represented a different era in automotive engineering, when manufacturers prioritized pure performance over environmental considerations. LeBron ran his fingers along its sleek lines while imagining the driving experience such a machine would provide. The price tag indicated it was worth well over $400,000, but for someone with his resources, it represented an achievable dream. "Excuse me," LeBron said, approaching another sales associate, a young man named David Chen who had been nervously watching the interaction between Thompson and Sarah. David was relatively new to the dealership, having joined the team only 6 months earlier after graduating from business school. He was still learning the nuances of luxury sales and hadn't yet developed the discriminatory instincts that seemed to plague some of his colleagues. "Could you tell me more about this model? I'm particularly interested in its performance specifications and maintenance history." David hesitated, glancing toward Thompson, who was now staring directly at them with obvious disapproval. The young salesman found himself caught between his professional obligations and his boss's clear expectations. His training had taught him to engage with every potential customer enthusiastically, but the signals from management suggested a different approach was expected in this situation. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm currently assisting another customer," David replied awkwardly, his voice betraying his discomfort with the obvious fabrication. "Perhaps you could come back another time when we're less busy?" The excuse was obviously fabricated. David had been standing alone when LeBron approached, and the showroom wasn't particularly crowded, with only a handful of other customers browsing the inventory. The rejection stung, but LeBron maintained his composure, recognizing the familiar pattern of discrimination he had encountered throughout his life, even after achieving unprecedented success in his professional career. The tension in the showroom continued to build as LeBron moved from car to car, his presence creating an uncomfortable atmosphere among the staff who had been instructed to monitor rather than assist him. The discrimination was subtle but unmistakable. Other customers received immediate attention and enthusiastic assistance, while LeBron was left to browse alone, his questions ignored and his interest dismissed. He approached a stunning black Ferrari SF90, its carbon fiber accents gleaming under the showroom lights like precious jewels. The SF90 represented the pinnacle of Ferrari's engineering prowess, a hybrid supercar that combined a 4-liter twin-turbo V8 engine with 3 electric motors to produce an astounding 986 horsepower. The vehicle could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 2.5 seconds, making it one of the fastest production cars ever built. Its price tag exceeded $600,000, placing it firmly in the realm of ultra-luxury vehicles that only the wealthiest individuals could afford. "Beautiful machine," LeBron murmured to himself, genuinely appreciating the artistry and technology before him. The car's design represented a perfect marriage of aerodynamic efficiency and aesthetic appeal, with every curve and surface optimized for both performance and visual impact. He had always been passionate about high-performance vehicles, understanding them not just as status symbols, but as marvels of engineering achievement that represented the absolute pinnacle of human creativity and technical skill. His collection already included several luxury cars, each chosen for specific reasons that went beyond simple wealth display. The Lamborghini Aventador satisfied his need for dramatic styling and emotional connection, while the Porsche 911 provided a more subtle but equally satisfying driving experience. A Ferrari would represent something special, a childhood dream finally realized, a connection to the racing heritage that had inspired him throughout his athletic career. Thompson watched from across the showroom, his irritation growing with each passing minute as LeBron continued to examine the vehicles with obvious knowledge and appreciation. In the dealer's narrow worldview, this was exactly the type of situation that disrupted the exclusive atmosphere he had worked so hard to create. He had built his reputation on catering to serious buyers, people who didn't need to ask about prices, because money was no object for them. The man in jeans and a baseball cap clearly didn't fit that profile, at least not in Thompson's prejudiced perception. "That's enough," Thompson muttered under his breath, his patience finally exhausted by what he perceived as an unwelcome intrusion into his carefully curated environment. He strode purposefully across the polished floor toward LeBron, his footsteps echoing in the spacious showroom with increasing intensity. The sound drew the attention of other customers and staff members who sensed that a confrontation was approaching, their conversations gradually dying away as tension filled the air. The atmosphere grew thick with anticipation as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Other customers, who had been quietly browsing and discussing potential purchases, began to notice the unusual dynamic playing out before them. Some were wealthy enough to recognize quality and sophistication regardless of how it was packaged, and they sensed that something significant was about to unfold. "Excuse me," Thompson said loudly as he approached LeBron, his voice carrying an unmistakable tone of authority and condescension that echoed throughout the showroom. The volume was intentionally elevated to ensure that his message would be heard by everyone present, establishing his dominance over the situation and making it clear that he was in charge of his establishment. "I need to ask you to step away from the vehicles. These cars are worth more than most people make in several years, and we can't have just anyone handling them." The words hit LeBron like a physical blow, their implications clear despite Thompson's attempt to disguise his racism behind concerns about vehicle protection. LeBron slowly turned to face Thompson, his expression calm, but his eyes revealing a flash of the hurt and anger that such moments inevitably produced. He had experienced discrimination before throughout his life, from his childhood in Akron through his early days in the NBA, but it never got easier to endure. The fact that it was happening in 2025 in one of the most progressive cities in America made it even more painful and disappointing. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" LeBron asked, his voice steady and controlled despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. Years of media training and public scrutiny had taught him to maintain his composure in difficult situations, but the effort required tremendous self-control. "I'm simply looking at cars that I'm interested in potentially purchasing. I haven't damaged anything or behaved inappropriately in any way." Thompson's expression grew even more stern, his prejudices fully activated now that he was face-to-face with the man he had been watching suspiciously for the past several minutes. The dealer's body language was aggressive and confrontational, designed to intimidate and establish dominance over what he perceived as an unwelcome intruder into his exclusive domain. "Sir, these vehicles start at $300,000 and go up to well over $1 million, Thompson replied, his voice dripping with condescension and barely concealed racism. "I seriously doubt you're in a position to make such a purchase. We have a very exclusive clientele here, and I need to maintain certain standards for my establishment." The confrontation was now happening in full view of other customers and staff members, creating an uncomfortable scene that would soon become the talk of Beverly Hills and beyond. The showroom had fallen silent except for the sound of Thompson's voice, with everyone present recognizing that they were witnessing something significant and troubling. The showroom fell completely silent as other customers and staff members stopped their conversations to witness the unfolding confrontation. The tension so thick it seemed to press against everyone present like a physical force. The atmosphere had transformed from one of luxury and sophistication to something much darker and more uncomfortable, with witnesses beginning to understand that they were observing something far more significant than a simple customer service dispute. LeBron stood his ground, his athletic frame towering over Thompson by several inches, but his demeanor remained remarkably composed given the circumstances. Years of facing adversity both on and off the basketball court had taught him to maintain his dignity even in the most challenging situations, drawing on an inner strength that had carried him through countless obstacles throughout his life. "I understand these are expensive vehicles," LeBron replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had faced discrimination before and refused to be diminished by it. The tone was respectful but firm, reflecting both his natural charisma and the leadership qualities that had made him one of the most respected figures in professional sports. "But I'm not sure why you're making assumptions about my ability to afford them based solely on my appearance. That seems problematic." The word problematic carried significant weight, suggesting that LeBron understood exactly what was happening and was choosing his words carefully to avoid escalating the situation while still making his point clear. His legal training, he had studied business and communications extensively throughout his career, had taught him the importance of precise language in potentially volatile situations. Thompson's face flushed red with a combination of anger and embarrassment as he realized that other customers were now watching the exchange with obvious disapproval. Several well-dressed individuals had stopped their own conversations to observe the confrontation, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust as they witnessed the blatant discrimination playing out before them. He had built his reputation on maintaining an atmosphere of exclusivity and sophistication, but his own behavior was creating exactly the kind of scene he claimed to want to avoid. "Look, I don't have time for this," Thompson said, his voice rising slightly as his frustration mounted. The dealer's composure was beginning to crack under the pressure of public scrutiny, and his words became more aggressive and less carefully considered. "We run a business here, not a tourist attraction. If you're not a serious buyer, I need to ask you to leave so we can attend to our actual customers." The implication that LeBron was somehow less of an actual customer than the other people in the showroom was clear to everyone present, and several witnesses began to react with visible discomfort and disapproval. A middle-aged woman near the front of the showroom shook her head in disgust, while an elderly gentleman appeared to be reaching for his phone, possibly to record the incident. Sarah Martinez, who had been watching the confrontation with growing horror from across the showroom, finally found the courage to approach her boss despite the potential consequences for her career. She had recognized something familiar about the tall man in the baseball cap, though she couldn't quite place where she had seen him before, and her instincts told her that Thompson was making a terrible mistake that could have serious repercussions for the business. "Mr. Thompson," she said quietly, trying to get his attention without escalating the situation further or drawing more public attention to the confrontation. Her voice carried a note of urgency that reflected her growing concern about the direction the conversation was taking. "Perhaps we should—" "Not now, Sarah," Thompson snapped, not taking his eyes off LeBron for even a moment. His tunnel vision had made him completely oblivious to the broader context of the situation, including the fact that multiple people were now recording the incident on their phones, and that his behavior was creating exactly the kind of nightmare that could destroy a luxury business. "I'm handling this situation." But LeBron had heard enough. The years of working his way up from poverty in Akron, the countless hours of training and dedication that had made him one of the greatest athletes of all time, the championships and accolades and business successes. None of it seemed to matter in this moment. Despite everything he had achieved, he was still just a black man in jeans being told he didn't belong in a luxury establishment by someone who had made assumptions based purely on his appearance. "You know what?" LeBron said, his voice remaining calm but carrying a new edge of determination as he reached into his pocket. The movement was deliberate and controlled, designed to make a point without appearing threatening or aggressive. "Let me make this simple for you." He opened his wallet and extracted a black American Express Centurion card, the exclusive black card that was only available to individuals with exceptional credit history and spending power exceeding multiple, it's safe, millions of dollars annually. The card itself was a symbol of ultimate financial privilege, offered only to a select few individuals worldwide who had demonstrated not just wealth, but responsible financial management at the highest levels. The annual fee alone was several $1,000s, and the spending requirements to maintain the card were beyond the reach of all but the most affluent individuals in society. This card has no preset spending limit, LeBron continued, holding the card up so Thompson could see it clearly. His voice carried the weight of someone who had earned his success through decades of hard work and was tired of having his worth questioned based on superficial judgments. Would you like to call American Express and verify my ability to purchase anything in this showroom? Thompson stared at the card, his expression shifting from arrogance to confusion as he processed what he was seeing. The black card was legendary. In luxury retail circles, only the wealthiest individuals in the world possessed one, and its presence indicated financial resources that exceeded the value of his entire inventory multiple times over. But his prejudices ran too deep to be overcome by a simple piece of plastic, no matter how exclusive or significant it might be. Anyone can get a credit card, Thompson said dismissively, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence and carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been present before. The statement was obviously false. The Centurion card was notoriously difficult to obtain, but Thompson's pride prevented him from acknowledging his error. That doesn't mean you should be handling million-dollar automobiles without supervision. See, confrontation reached a new level of absurdity as Thompson continued to double down on his discriminatory behavior, apparently unwilling to admit his mistake even when presented with clear evidence of LeBron's financial capacity that exceeded that of virtually any other customer who had ever entered his establishment. The other customers in the showroom were now openly staring, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a significant incident that would likely have far-reaching consequences. The presence of recording devices added a new dimension to the confrontation, transforming it from a private business dispute into a public spectacle that would inevitably be shared across social media platforms and news networks. Several witnesses had begun live streaming the incident on various platforms, their commentary providing real-time analysis of the discrimination they were witnessing. LeBron took a deep breath, drawing on the mental strength that had carried him through countless challenges on and off the basketball court throughout his two-decade career. The breathing technique was something he had learned from meditation and mindfulness practices that had become an important part of his personal development, helping him maintain composure in high-pressure situations. He had two choices. He could escalate the situation and use his celebrity status to embarrass Thompson publicly, or he could try one more time to resolve things peacefully and use the moment as a teaching opportunity. "Sir," LeBron said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had been in the public eye for over 2 decades and had learned to navigate complex social situations with grace and dignity. The tone was measured and controlled, reflecting both his natural leadership abilities and his commitment to taking the high road even when facing prejudice and discrimination. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I'm a legitimate customer with legitimate interest in purchasing a vehicle. All I'm asking for is the same level of service and respect that you would show any other potential buyer." The request was reasonable and straightforward, highlighting the fundamental unfairness of the treatment he was receiving while offering Thompson an opportunity to rectify the situation without losing face completely. LeBron's approach demonstrated the emotional intelligence and social awareness that had made him a successful leader both on and off the court, understanding that confrontation often produced less positive outcomes than patient education. But Thompson was too far down the path of his own making to turn back now. his pride and deeply ingrained prejudices combining to create a situation where admitting error would mean acknowledging the fundamental unfairness of his worldview. The dealer had built his entire professional identity around his ability to identify and cater to wealthy clients, and accepting that he had misjudged this particular customer would call into question his competence and judgment in ways that his ego simply couldn't tolerate. "I don't care what kind of card you have," Thompson said, his voice echoing through the showroom with increasing volume and intensity. The statement was delivered with the kind of absolute certainty that often masked deep insecurity and fear of being proven wrong. "I built this business by knowing my customers, and you're not the type of person who buys Ferraris. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." The threat of calling security was the final straw for several people in the BU showroom, transforming passive observers into active participants in the unfolding drama. The escalation represented a point of no return, making it clear that Thompson was willing to humiliate and potentially criminalize a customer rather than acknowledge his own prejudiced assumptions. A well-dressed woman near the back of the space stepped forward, her expression showing a mixture of disgust and disbelief at what she was witnessing. She was clearly wealthy herself, based on her designer clothing and expensive jewelry, and her intervention carried the weight of someone who understood the luxury retail environment and recognized how far outside normal boundaries Thompson's behavior had strayed. "Are you kidding me right now?" she said, her voice cutting through the tension with righteous indignation. The question was rhetorical, but powerful, expressing the shock and dismay that many witnesses were feeling as they watched the incident unfold. "You're literally discriminating against this man because he's black. In 2025, in Beverly Hills. Do you have any idea how this looks?" Her words articulated what many people in the showroom were thinking, but hadn't felt comfortable. Providing external validation for the discrimination that LeBron was experiencing and making it impossible for Thompson to continue pretending that his behavior was based on legitimate business concerns rather than racial prejudice. Thompson turned toward the woman, his frustration now directed at multiple targets, as he realized that his control over the situation was slipping away completely. The dealer's anger was beginning to override his business sense, leading him to alienate potential customers in defense of his discriminatory actions. "Ma'am, this is none of your business," Thompson replied, his voice carrying a tone of dismissive condescension that revealed his attitude toward anyone who challenged his authority. "I run my establishment the way I see fit, and I don't need lectures from customers about how to manage my inventory or conduct my business." But the woman wasn't backing down, her moral conviction overriding any concern about creating a scene or challenging a business owner in his own establishment. "Actually, it is my business when I'm witnessing blatant racism in a place where I'm considering spending my money. And frankly, if this is how you treat potential customers, I'm not sure I want to do business here at all." Her threat to take her business elsewhere represented exactly the kind of consequence that Thompson should have been concerned about. But his prejudice had blinded him to the business implications of his actions. The incident was rapidly spiraling, beyond his control, with multiple customers now expressing their disapproval and threatening to leave. Sarah Martinez could no longer contain herself, her recognition of LeBron finally crystallizing into complete certainty. She had finally placed where she recognized LeBron from, and the realization hit her like a physical blow that left her feeling sick to her stomach. She approached Thompson one more time, her voice urgent and filled with panic as she tried to prevent the situation from deteriorating further. "Mr. Thompson, please, you need to stop this right now," she whispered intensely, her words carrying the desperation of someone who understood that her boss was about to make a mistake that could destroy everything they had worked to build. "Do you know who that is? That's LeBron James. The LeBron James. He's worth over $1 billion. Thompson's face went completely white as Sarah's words sank in, the blood draining from his features so dramatically that several nearby customers noticed the sudden change in his appearance. LeBron James, the king, one of the most famous athletes in the world, worth over $1 billion, standing in his showroom being treated like a common criminal by someone who claimed to cater to elite clientele. The magnitude of his mistake began to crash down on him like a devastating avalanche, each second bringing new understanding of how catastrophically he had misjudged the situation. The irony was almost unbearable. Here was a man who had spent decades building relationships with wealthy athletes, actors, and business leaders. Yet he had failed to recognize one of the most successful and recognizable figures in all of sports. Thompson's entire business model was based on his supposed ability to identify and cater to elite customers. But his prejudices had blinded him to the extraordinary individual standing directly in front of him. But it was too late for damage control. LeBron had heard Sarah's whispered revelation, and his expression shifted from patient tolerance to something much more serious and purposeful. The hurt in his eyes was now mixed with a steely determination that anyone who had watched him play basketball would have recognized immediately. The look of someone who had been challenged and was preparing to respond with the full force of his considerable abilities. So now that you know who I am, suddenly the treatment changes? LeBron asked, his voice carrying a quiet intensity that made everyone in the showroom stop what they were doing and focus completely on his words. The question cut to the heart of the issue, exposing the fundamental injustice of a system where respect and dignity were contingent on fame and recognition rather than basic human worth. That's not how this works. Every person who walks through those doors deserves basic respect and dignity, regardless of their fame or wealth or skin color. The statement was delivered with the moral authority of someone who had spent his entire adult life fighting against inequality and injustice, using his platform to advocate for social change and economic opportunity for underserved communities. LeBron's words carried weight not just because of his celebrity status, but because of his consistent track record of putting his money and influence behind his principles. Thompson tried desperately to salvage the situation, but his words came out as pathetic stammering that only made his earlier behavior appear even more shameful by comparison. "Mr. James, I had no idea. I mean, if I had known..." "If you had known what?" LeBron interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. During the entire confrontation, carrying the full force of his frustration and disappointment. The question was delivered with prosecutorial precision, designed to expose the flawed logic behind Thompson's discriminatory behavior. "If you had known I was famous? If you had known I was wealthy? What about if I had just been a regular black man looking to buy a car? Would that have been okay?" The rhetorical questions hung in the air like accusations, forcing everyone present to confront the uncomfortable truth about how society often treated people differently based on their perceived status and value. LeBron's approach was masterful, using his own experience to highlight broader patterns of discrimination that affected countless individuals who didn't have his platform or resources to fight back. The showroom was now completely silent, except for LeBron's voice, which carried the power and authority of someone who had spent his life fighting against exactly this type of discrimination. Every person present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. Not just a celebrity encounter, but a masterclass in dignity and social justice delivered by one of the most influential figures of his generation. "Let me explain something to you," LeBron continued, stepping closer to Thompson with controlled intensity that demonstrated both his physical presence and his moral authority. I grew up in Akron, Ohio. My mother and I struggled just to keep a roof over our heads. I know what it's like to be judged, to be dismissed, to be told I don't belong somewhere because of how I look or where I come from. I've spent my entire adult life trying to break down barriers and create opportunities for people who look like me. Thompson stood frozen, realizing that every word coming out of LeBron's mouth was being recorded by multiple people in the showroom and would inevitably end up on social media and news networks around the world. The video footage would become a permanent record of his discriminatory behavior, with no possibility of explaining it away or minimizing its impact. And here I am, 40 years old, 4 NBA championships, multiple Olympic gold medals, successful businesses, charitable foundations that have helped thousands of kids get college educations, and I'm still being treated like I don't belong in a car dealership because I'm wearing jeans and a baseball cap, LeBron said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his frustration and disappointment with a society that still judged people based on superficial characteristics rather than character and accomplishment. The personal details LeBron shared added emotional depth to his response, reminding everyone present that behind the celebrity status and athletic achievements was a human being who had experienced the same types of discrimination that affected millions of other Americans every day. His vulnerability in sharing his background made his message even more powerful and relatable. "You want to know what's really sad about this situation?" LeBron asked, addressing not just Thompson, but everyone in the showroom, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had thought deeply about issues of race and equality throughout his public career. "It's not that I was discriminated against. Unfortunately, that happens more often than people realize, even to someone in my position. What's sad is that this represents how many other people are treated every single day. People who don't have my platform, my resources, or my ability to fight back." The atmosphere in the showroom had transformed completely, the space now charged with an energy that went far beyond a simple customer service dispute. What had started as a routine Saturday morning for luxury car shopping had become something much more significant. A moment of reckoning that would reverberate far beyond the walls of the Ferrari dealership and spark conversations about race and equality across the country. LeBron stood in the center of the space, no longer trying to maintain a low profile or blend in with other customers. His presence commanded the attention of everyone present, from the horrified staff members to the shocked customers who had inadvertently become witnesses to a historic moment. The casual clothing that had initially triggered Thompson's discriminatory response now seemed irrelevant compared to the moral authority and dignity that LeBron projected through his words and demeanor. "You want to know what's really sad about this situation?" LeBron asked, his voice carrying across the now quiet showroom with the resonance of someone who had spent decades in the public eye, learning how to communicate complex ideas to diverse audiences. He was no longer speaking just to Thompson, but addressing everyone present, using his platform to educate and inspire in the way that had made him one of the most respected voices in professional sports. The question was rhetorical but powerful, designed to shift the focus from his personal experience to the broader social implications of what had just occurred. LeBron's approach demonstrated the kind of leadership that had made him successful, not just as an athlete, but as a businessman and social advocate, understanding that individual incidents could be used to illuminate systemic problems. "It's not that I was discriminated against," LeBron continued, his tone becoming more reflective and philosophical as he processed the experience in real time. "Unfortunately, that happens more often than people realize, even to someone in my position. What's sad is that this represents how many other people are treated every single day. People who don't have my platform, my resources, or my ability to fight back." The statement revealed LeBron's understanding that his experience was not unique, but representative of a much larger pattern of discrimination that affected countless individuals who lacked his celebrity status and financial resources. His perspective demonstrated both humility and social consciousness, recognizing that his privileges came with responsibilities to speak out against injustice. Thompson attempted another apology, but his words rang hollow in the charged atmosphere, coming across as desperate damage control rather than genuine remorse. "Mr. James, please, I sincerely apologize. This was all a terrible misunderstanding. Please allow me to make this right. Any car in the showroom, I'll give you our best price, full service package included." The offer was clearly an attempt to buy his way out of the situation, but it demonstrated Thompson's continued failure to understand the fundamental nature of what had occurred. His focus on financial compensation rather than acknowledging the deeper issues of prejudice and discrimination revealed that he still didn't grasp the significance of his actions or their broader implications. But LeBron held up his hand, stopping Thompson mid-sentence with a gesture that carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect and attention. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about getting a deal on a car. This is about basic human decency. This is about treating every customer, every person, with the same level of respect, regardless of what they look like or how they're dressed." The response demonstrated LeBron's commitment to principles over personal gain, refusing to be bought off or distracted from the larger issues at stake. His moral clarity in the moment was striking, showing why he had become such a respected voice on social justice issues throughout his career. A young black teenager who had been browsing with his father stepped forward, his voice shaking with emotion as he found the courage to share his own experience. "Mr. James, this happened to my dad and me at a jewelry store last week. They followed us around like we were going to steal something, even though my dad was trying to buy my mom an EBE anniversary gift." The teenager's intervention added another layer of significance to the moment, demonstrating that LeBron's experience was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of discrimination that affected Black Americans across different income levels and social circumstances. His willingness to speak up was clearly inspired by LeBron's example, showing how moments of moral leadership could encourage others to find their own voices. LeBron's expression softened as he looked at the teenager, seeing his younger self in the boy's eyes and recognizing the pain and confusion that came with experiencing discrimination at such a formative age. "What's your name, young man?" "Marcus," the teenager replied, his voice gaining strength as he felt the support and attention of the gathered crowd. "Marcus Williams." "Well, Marcus Williams, let me tell you something," LeBron said, his voice taking on the tone of a mentor speaking to a student, drawing on his experience as a father and role model to countless young people. "Don't you ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong somewhere because of your skin color. You have just as much right to be in any store, any restaurant, any establishment as anyone else. And don't let experiences like this make you bitter. Let them make you stronger." The advice was personal and powerful, delivered with the conviction of someone who had faced similar challenges and overcome them through determination and resilience. LeBron's words carried special weight because of his own background and the obstacles he had overcome to achieve success, making his message particularly meaningful to a young person facing similar discrimination. The father, clearly moved by LeBron's words and the attention he was showing to his son, stepped forward as well. "Thank you for saying that, Mr. James. It means a lot coming from someone like you. My son looks up to athletes like you, and seeing how you handle situations like this with dignity and grace, it's exactly the kind of example he needs." Thompson watched this exchange with growing horror, realizing that his actions had not only offended one of the world's most famous athletes, but had also traumatized other customers in his showroom, including a young person who would likely remember this experience for the rest of his life. The business he had spent decades building was crumbling around him in real time, but, more importantly, he was beginning to understand the human cost of his prejudiced behavior. "Mr. James," Thompson tried again, his voice desperate now as he grasped for any possible way to salvage the situation. "Please tell me what I can do to fix this situation. I'll do anything. Training, policy changes, community outreach, whatever it takes." LeBron turned back to Thompson, his expression serious but not vindictive, showing the kind of grace under pressure that had made him a respected leader throughout his career. "You want to fix this? Start by examining your own biases and prejudices. Get some training for yourself and your staff about unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity. And most importantly, treat every person who walks through these doors with the same respect you would show your best customer." The confrontation had now attracted a considerable crowd outside the dealership. As word spread through social media that LeBron James was involved in some kind of significant incident at the Ferrari showroom on Wilshire Boulevard, people were gathering on the sidewalk, some hoping to catch a glimpse of the basketball superstar, others drawn by the drama that was clearly unfolding inside the luxury automotive showroom. Local news crews were beginning to arrive, their satellite trucks pulling up to the curb as reporters and camera operators prepared to cover what was clearly becoming a major story with national implications. The combination of celebrity, luxury cars, and racial discrimination created exactly the type of narrative that would dominate news cycles and social media feeds for days or weeks to come, with potential ramifications extending far beyond the immediate participants. The presence of media outside added pressure to an already tense situation, but it also provided an opportunity for the incident to become a catalyst for broader conversations about discrimination and social justice. LeBron understood the significance of the moment and the platform it provided, recognizing that his response would be scrutinized and potentially influence how similar situations were handled in the future. Inside the showroom, LeBron made a decision that would define how this story would be remembered and what lessons people would take from it. Rather than simply leaving in anger or accepting Thompson's desperate apologies and financial offers, he chose to use the moment as a teaching opportunity that could benefit everyone present and potentially reach a much larger audience through social media and news coverage. "Everyone here today has witnessed something important," LeBron announced, addressing the entire showroom with the kind of authoritative presence that had made him a natural leader throughout his athletic career. His voice carried easily across the space, ensuring that every person present could hear his words clearly. "You've seen how quickly assumptions can turn into discrimination, and how that discrimination can hurt real people. But you've also seen how we can choose to respond to ignorance with education rather than anger." The statement demonstrated LeBron's commitment to using his platform constructively, choosing to focus on positive change rather than revenge or retaliation. His approach reflected the emotional intelligence and social awareness that had made him successful not just as an athlete, but as a businessman and community leader. He walked over to the Ferrari SF90 that had originally caught his attention, running his hand along its sleek surface one more time, while using the moment to make a broader point about values and priorities. "This is a beautiful car. It represents incredible engineering, artistic design, and automotive excellence. But you know what's more beautiful? A society where every person can walk into a showroom like this and be judged by their character and their intentions, not by their appearance or their race." The comparison was elegant and powerful, using the luxury vehicle as a metaphor for the kind of society that LeBron envisioned. One where true beauty came from equality and justice rather than material possessions. His words resonated with the diverse group of witnesses, many of whom were clearly moved by his message and perspective. Thompson stood nearby, his face a mask of regret and embarrassment, as the full weight of his actions became increasingly clear. Watching LeBron handle the situation with such grace and dignity made his own behavior appear even more shameful by comparison, highlighting the contrast between prejudice and wisdom, between ignorance and enlightenment. "Mr. Thompson," LeBron said, turning to address the dealer directly while maintaining his composure and dignity despite the circumstances. "I'm not going to destroy your business or try to ruin your reputation, but I am going to use this as an opportunity to start a conversation about something that's clearly still a problem in our society. Racism didn't end when we elected a black president, and it didn't disappear when athletes like me achieved success. It's still here, it's still real, and it still hurts people every day." The statement was both generous and firm, offering Thompson a path toward redemption while making it clear that there would be consequences and expectations for change. LeBron's approach demonstrated the kind of leadership that had made him respected far beyond the basketball court, showing how to hold people accountable while still believing in their capacity for growth and improvement. A middle-aged man near the front of the showroom, who had been watching the entire exchange with increasing emotion, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "Mr. James, I want to apologize too. I've been standing here for 20 minutes watching this happen, and I should have said something earlier. I should have stood up for what's right instead of just being a passive observer." The man's confession added another dimension to the conversation, highlighting the role that bystanders play in either perpetuating or challenging discrimination. His willingness to acknowledge his own failure to act demonstrated the kind of self-reflection that LeBron was encouraging throughout his response to the incident. LeBron nodded appreciatively, recognizing the courage it took for the man to speak up and acknowledge his own shortcomings. That's exactly the kind of self-reflection we all need to do. It's not enough to just not be racist. We have to be actively anti-racist. We have to speak up when we see injustice happening, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient for us. Personally, the distinction between passive non-racism and active anti-racism was an important one, reflecting LeBron's sophisticated understanding of social justice issues and his commitment to encouraging others to take more active roles in creating positive change. His message resonated with many of the witnesses who were clearly thinking about their own roles and responsibilities in similar situations. The dealership had now become the epicenter of a much larger conversation about race, privilege, and social justice that extended far beyond the immediate participants. News crews were setting up equipment outside. Social media was buzzing with real-time updates from people inside the showroom, and the incident was rapidly becoming one of the most talked-about stories of the day across multiple platforms and news networks. The hashtag Ferrari discrimination had already begun trending on Twitter, with thousands of users sharing their own experiences with racial profiling and discrimination in retail environments. The story was resonating with people who had faced similar treatment in various settings, creating a viral moment that highlighted the persistence of these issues in contemporary American society. LeBron's phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and text messages from his management team, family members, teammates, and friends who had seen the story breaking on social media and were concerned about both his well-being and the potential impact on his various business interests. But he remained focused on the moment, understanding that how he handled the next few minutes would define not just his own legacy, but potentially influence how similar situations were handled in the future. "I want everyone here to understand something," LeBron continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades in the public eye. and learned how to use his platform effectively for social change. This isn't about me versus Mr. Thompson. This isn't about getting revenge or destroying someone's livelihood. This is about using a painful moment to create positive change that can benefit everyone. The clarification was important, demonstrating LeBron's commitment to constructive rather than destructive approaches to social justice. His perspective reflected years of experience dealing with similar incidents, and his understanding that lasting change required education and cooperation rather than simply punishment or retribution. He turned to Sarah Martinez, who had been standing quietly nearby, clearly upset about her boss's behavior and concerned about the implications for her own career and the dealership's reputation. "Sarah, you tried to do the right thing. You tried to prevent this from escalating. When you recognized that something was wrong, that took courage, and I respect that kind of moral leadership." Sarah nodded gratefully, though her expression remained troubled as she processed the full implications of what had occurred. "Mr. James, I'm so sorry this happened. I've worked here for 5 years, and I've never seen anything like this before. This doesn't represent who we are as a company, or at least who I thought we were." Her response revealed the internal conflict that many employees face when confronted with discriminatory behavior from their supervisors or colleagues. Sarah's discomfort with Thompson's actions reflected her own values and professional standards, but also highlighted the difficult position that employees often find themselves in when witnessing workplace discrimination. "Actually," LeBron replied, gently but directly, "I think it represents exactly who this company has been up until now. But it doesn't have to represent who you become moving forward. That's the choice you all have to make now, whether to continue operating the same way or to make real changes that ensure everyone is treated with dignity and respect." The response was both honest and hopeful, acknowledging the reality of what had occurred while offering a path toward improvement and redemption. LeBron's approach demonstrated his understanding that meaningful change required honest assessment of current problems rather than denial or minimization. Thompson, who had been listening to this exchange with growing desperation and recognition of the damage to his reputation, finally spoke up again. "Mr. James, I want to make a public apology. I want to take full responsibility for what happened here today, and I want to commit to making real changes in how we operate this business going forward." The offer was more substantive than his earlier attempts at damage control, suggesting that he was beginning to understand the seriousness of the situation and the need for genuine accountability rather than just superficial gestures. However, his motivations remained questionable. Was this genuine remorse or simply a calculated attempt to minimize the business consequences of his actions? LeBron studied Thompson's face carefully, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus simple damage control and public relations management. His experience in the public eye had taught him to recognize the difference between authentic change and performative responses designed to minimize consequences without addressing underlying issues. "Mr. Thompson, words are easy. Change is hard," LeBron replied, his tone serious but not dismissive. "If you're serious about making things right, here's what I want to see. Mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all your staff, partnerships with community organizations that serve underrepresented communities, and a commitment to treating every customer with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or background." The terms were reasonable but would require real effort and investment on Thompson's part, going beyond simple apologies to demand concrete actions that would demonstrate genuine commitment to change. LeBron's requirements reflected his understanding that meaningful progress required systemic changes rather than just individual expressions of regret. Everyone in the showroom waited to see how Thompson would respond to LeBron's challenge, understanding that his answer would determine whether this incident could become a catalyst for positive change or would simply be remembered as another example of discrimination without consequences. "Yes," Thompson said immediately, his voice carrying a note of desperation, but also what seemed like genuine commitment. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes. I'll hire consultants. I'll work with any organizations you recommend. I'll invest whatever. Resources are necessary to ensure this never happens again to anyone." But LeBron wasn't finished outlining his expectations. "And I want this to be public. I want other businesses to see what real accountability looks like. This can't just be a private conversation or internal policy change. It has to be a public commitment to change that can be monitored and evaluated by the community." The requirement for public accountability was crucial, reflecting LeBron's understanding that private promises were often forgotten once media attention moved on to other stories. By demanding public commitments, he was creating a framework for ongoing scrutiny and accountability that would make it difficult for Thompson to backtrack on his promises once the immediate crisis passed. News of the incident had now spread far beyond Beverly Hills and Los Angeles, with major news networks across the country picking up the story and social media exploding with commentary from celebrities, athletes, politicians, and ordinary citizens who were sharing their own experiences with discrimination and racial profiling. The hashtag #Ferrari discrimination was trending worldwide, and the video footage shot by customers in the showroom was being viewed millions of times across various platforms. The story had all the elements that made for viral content: celebrity involvement, clear moral issues, dramatic confrontation, and broader social relevance that resonated with people's personal experiences. News producers recognized the significance of the incident and were preparing comprehensive coverage that would likely dominate the news cycle for several days. LeBron's management team had arrived at the dealership, along with several Lakers organization officials who were concerned about how the incident might affect the team's reputation and LeBron's various business relationships. The group included his longtime business manager Maverick Carter, publicist Adam Mendelsohn, and legal counsel who were all trying to assess the situation and provide guidance about next steps. But LeBron made it clear that he intended to handle the situation personally, in his own way, drawing on his years of experience dealing with social justice issues and his commitment to using his platform for positive change. "This is bigger than basketball," he told his advisors firmly. "This is about fundamental human rights and dignity. I'm not going to let this moment pass without making sure something good comes out of it." His team understood and respected his decision, recognizing that LeBron had consistently demonstrated good judgment in handling controversial situations throughout his career. They positioned themselves to support his approach while managing the logistical and legal aspects of the rapidly developing situation. Thompson had retreated to his office to begin making phone calls to crisis management consultants, public relations, firms, and diversity training organizations. But the damage to his reputation was already extensive and potentially irreversible. Local news coverage was uniformly negative, social media sentiment was overwhelmingly critical of his actions, and several potential customers had already contacted the dealership to cancel appointments and express their disgust with his behavior. Business consequences were immediate and severe, with the incident affecting not just Thompson's reputation, but potentially the broader Ferrari brand, if the company didn't distance itself from his actions. Luxury brands were particularly sensitive to associations with discrimination, understanding that their customer base included many affluent minority customers who would not tolerate such behavior. Meanwhile, LeBron continued to engage with other customers and staff members in the showroom, turning what could have been a purely negative experience into an opportunity for education and dialogue that was benefiting everyone present. He spoke with young Marcus Williams and his father about their own experiences with discrimination, offering encouragement and perspective from someone who had faced similar challenges throughout his life. "You know," LeBron said to the gathered crowd, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had thought deeply about these issues throughout his public career. "I've been fortunate in my life. I've had success that most people can only dream of. Championships, business success, financial security for my family. But that success doesn't insulate me from racism, and it doesn't make me forget where I came from or the struggles that so many people still face every day." The statement demonstrated LeBron's humility and continued connection to his roots, showing that success hadn't disconnected him from the experiences of ordinary people or made him complacent about ongoing social issues. His perspective resonated with witnesses who appreciated his authenticity and continued commitment to social justice, despite his personal achievements. "Every time something like this happens, it reminds me that we still have work to do as a society," LeBron continued, his tone becoming more reflective as he processed the experience. "It reminds me that the privileges I enjoy today came from the sacrifices of people who came before me, and that I have a responsibility to use my platform to create opportunities for the people who come after me." A reporter who had managed to get inside the showroom approached LeBron with a microphone and camera crew, hoping to get an official statement about the incident for the evening news. "Mr. James, how do you feel about what happened here today? Are you planning to take any legal action against the dealership or Mr. Thompson personally?" LeBron considered the question carefully before responding, understanding that his words would be broadcast to millions of people and could influence public opinion about both the specific incident and broader issues of racial discrimination. "I'm disappointed but not surprised, unfortunately. This type of thing happens more often than people realize, not just to celebrities but to ordinary people who don't have the platform or resources to fight back effectively." The response was measured and thoughtful, avoiding inflammatory language while still making his point about the broader significance of the incident. LeBron's media training and experience had taught him the importance of choosing his words carefully in situations that would receive extensive coverage. The reporter pressed further, hoping to get more specific details about potential consequences. "Do you think Mr. Thompson's apology is sincere? Do you believe people can really change their deeply held prejudices, especially when they're facing public pressure and potential business consequences?" "I believe in the power of education and personal growth," LeBron replied, his response reflecting both his optimism about human nature and his understanding of the complexities involved in changing deeply ingrained attitudes. "I've seen people change their perspectives when they're willing to do the hard work of examining their own biases and learning from their mistakes. Whether Mr. Thompson is willing to do that work remains to be seen, but I'm hopeful that this incident can become a catalyst for positive change rather than just another negative story." As the afternoon wore on, the Ferrari dealership had become something unprecedented in the luxury retail world, an impromptu forum for discussing race relations in America that was attracting participants from across the social and economic spectrum. What had started as a simple case of retail discrimination had evolved into a much larger conversation about privilege, prejudice, and the ongoing struggle for equality that was resonating with people far beyond the immediate participants. The showroom had filled with an unlikely mix of people: wealthy customers who had come to browse luxury vehicles, community activists who had heard about the incident on social media, local residents who were curious about the commotion, and media representatives who were covering the story. The diversity of the crowd created opportunities for dialogue across racial and economic lines that rarely occurred in such settings. LeBron had decided to stay longer than originally planned, recognizing that he had a unique opportunity to impact hearts and minds in a setting where such conversations didn't typically happen. He spoke with customers, staff members, reporters, and community members, sharing his perspective on discrimination and social justice with anyone willing to listen and learn from his experiences. People sometimes ask me why I speak out about social issues, LeBron said to a group that had gathered around him near the showroom's center, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had thought deeply about his responsibilities as a public figure. They say I should just stick to sports and not get involved in politics or social justice. But how can I stay silent when I see injustice happening? How can I use my platform only for entertainment when I could use it to make a real difference in people's lives? The rhetorical questions reflected LeBron's long-standing philosophy about the responsibilities that came with fame and influence. Throughout his career, he had consistently used his platform to advocate for social change, education, and economic opportunity, understanding that silence in the face of injustice was a form of complicity. Thompson emerged from his office looking haggard and defeated, carrying a stack of business cards from diversity consultants, civil rights organizations, and community groups that he had contacted during his frantic afternoon of damage control. He approached LeBron with obvious trepidation, still hoping to salvage something from the wreckage of his reputation and business relationships. "Mr. James," Thompson said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent the afternoon confronting the full scope of his mistakes. "I've been making calls all afternoon. I've scheduled sensitivity training for next week, and I'm working with the NNACP to establish a partnership program. I've also decided to offer full scholarships to business students from historically Black colleges who want to intern here and learn about the luxury automotive industry." The proposals were more substantive than his earlier offers, suggesting that Thompson was beginning to understand the depth of change required to address the problems his behavior had revealed. However, the timing of his conversion remained suspect. Was this genuine enlightenment or simply a calculated response to protect his business interests? LeBron listened to Thompson's proposals with interest but remained appropriately skeptical about the dealer's motivations and long-term commitment to change. "Mr. Thompson, those are good first steps, and I appreciate that you're taking concrete action rather than just offering empty apologies. But real change takes time, and it requires ongoing commitment, not just a few programs implemented in response to bad publicity." The response demonstrated LeBron's sophisticated understanding of how institutional change worked, recognizing that sustainable progress required long-term commitment rather than just immediate responses to crisis situations. His skepticism was warranted given the circumstances, but his willingness to acknowledge positive steps showed his commitment to encouraging genuine improvement. "I understand that," Thompson replied, his voice carrying what seemed like genuine humility for the first time during the entire incident. "And I want you to know that I'm committed to this for the long term. I realize now that I've been part of the problem, and I want to be part of the solution moving forward." As the conversation continued, other customers and staff members began sharing their own stories about discrimination and prejudice, creating an atmosphere of openness and vulnerability that was unusual in such an upscale commercial environment. The showroom had become an unlikely place for healing and education, with people from different backgrounds coming together to discuss difficult but important topics that were rarely addressed so directly. A young Latina woman who worked as a sales associate at a neighboring luxury boutique spoke up about her own experiences with customers who had made assumptions about her capabilities based on her ethnicity and age. "I've had people ask to speak to someone more senior when I'm the most experienced person on the floor," she said, her voice carrying frustration that many people in the crowd could relate to. It's exhausting to constantly have to prove that you belong in spaces where other people are automatically assumed to belong. Her contribution added another dimension to the conversation, showing that discrimination wasn't limited to interactions between customers and businesses, but also affected employees who faced prejudice from customers. The intersectional nature of discrimination became clearer as more people shared their experiences. An older white gentleman, well-dressed and clearly affluent, admitted that he had harbored unconscious biases that he was only now beginning to recognize and address. "I've always considered myself a fair person," he said, his voice carrying genuine remorse. "But listening to these stories makes me realize that I've probably made assumptions about people that weren't fair or accurate. I need to do better." His admission was particularly powerful because it came from someone who clearly fit the profile of Thompson's typical customer base, showing that the conversation was reaching people who might not normally be exposed to such perspectives. The willingness of privileged individuals to acknowledge their own biases was crucial for creating the kind of systemic change that LeBron was advocating. "This is what real progress looks like," LeBron observed, his voice carrying satisfaction at seeing the productive dialogue that was emerging from such a negative initial incident. "It's not about perfection. It's about people being willing to have honest conversations about difficult topics and then committing to do better in their own lives and communities." The comment reflected LeBron's understanding that social change happened through countless individual decisions and interactions rather than just policy changes or high-profile incidents. His optimism about human nature and capacity for growth was evident in his response to the diverse group of people who were engaging with these issues. As the sun began to set over Beverly Hills, casting long golden shadows across the dealership's showroom floor, LeBron prepared to leave the Ferrari dealership, but not before making one final statement that would define how this extraordinary day would be remembered. The showroom was still filled with people, customers, staff, reporters, and community members who had been drawn by the unfolding story and stayed for the meaningful conversations that had emerged. The lighting in the showroom had shifted as the day progressed, with the harsh overhead illumination giving way to the softer, warmer tones of late afternoon sunshine filtering through the glass facade. The change in atmosphere seemed to mirror the transformation that had occurred throughout the day, as a moment of discrimination had evolved into an opportunity for education and dialogue. "Before I go," LeBron announced, his voice carrying across the now quiet space with the authority and presence that had made him a natural leader throughout his athletic career, "I want to leave you all with something to think about. Today we witnessed how quickly prejudice can turn into discrimination, and how that discrimination can hurt real people with real feelings and real dignity that deserves to be respected." He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in as he looked around the room at the diverse group of people who had been touched by the day's events. But we also saw how a negative situation can become an opportunity for growth, education, and positive change when people are willing to listen, learn, and commit to doing better. The statement encapsulated the dual nature of what had occurred, both the pain of discrimination and the hope for progress that could emerge from honest confrontation with difficult truths. LeBron's ability to find constructive meaning in negative experiences reflected the resilience and wisdom that had carried him through numerous challenges throughout his life and career. He looked directly at Thompson, who stood nearby with his head slightly bowed, clearly still processing the events of the day and the implications for his business and personal reputation. "Mr. Thompson, you made a serious mistake today that hurt me and other people in ways that go beyond just business transactions. But what matters now is what you do next. The commitments you've made here are a good start, but the real test will be whether you follow through on them when the cameras are gone and the attention has moved on to other stories." Thompson nodded solemnly, his expression showing what appeared to be genuine understanding of the weight of his responsibilities. Moving forward, Mr. James, I give you my word that this will be a turning point for my business and for me personally. I will not let this day be in vain, and I will work every day to ensure that what happened here never happens again to anyone. The promise was delivered with conviction, though only time would tell whether Thompson would maintain his commitment to change once the immediate crisis had passed. LeBron's decision to offer a path toward redemption rather than simply seeking punishment reflected his belief in human capacity for growth, and his understanding that lasting change required forgiveness alongside accountability. LeBron then addressed the broader audience that had gathered throughout the afternoon. To everyone else here today, I want you to remember that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable society. It's not enough to simply not be racist. We have to be actively anti-racist. We have to speak up when we see injustice, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient for us personally. The distinction between passive tolerance and active advocacy was an important one that reflected LeBron's sophisticated understanding of social justice issues. His message challenged everyone present to move beyond simply avoiding discriminatory behavior to actively working against it in their daily lives. As he prepared to leave, LeBron walked over to young Marcus Williams and his father one more time, understanding the particular importance of his message for the next generation. Marcus, I want you to remember this day not because of the discrimination that happened, but because of how we all chose to respond to it. Use this as motivation to be part of the solution as you grow up. The teenager nodded eagerly, clearly, inspired by everything he had witnessed and the personal attention he had received from one of his heroes. Mr. James, thank you for showing us how to handle situations like this with dignity and grace. I'll never forget what I learned here today. LeBron smiled and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, the gesture carrying the weight of mentorship and hope for the future. That's what leadership is about, young man. It's not about being perfect. It's about doing the right thing even when it's difficult. And it's about using whatever platform you have to make the world a little bit better for the people who come after you. As LeBron finally walked toward the exit, the assembled crowd gave him a spontaneous round of applause that seemed to acknowledge not just his celebrity status, but his moral leadership throughout a difficult situation. He had entered the dealership as a customer looking to buy a car and was leaving as something much more significant, a catalyst for change and a powerful voice for justice who had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into an opportunity for community education and growth. The story of what happened at the Ferrari dealership that day would be told and retold for years to come, serving as both a reminder of how far society still needs to go in the fight against racism and an example of how one person's courage and dignity can transform a moment of injustice into an opportunity for education and positive change. The incident would become a case study in leadership, resilience, and the ongoing struggle for equality that continues to define American society. Thompson stood in his empty showroom as the last of the crowd dispersed, facing the reality that his business and personal reputation had been fundamentally altered by his actions and choices. The path forward would require genuine commitment to change, sustained effort to rebuild trust, and ongoing accountability to the community he had alienated through his discriminatory behavior. If you found this story impactful and believe in the importance of standing up against discrimination in all its forms, please share it with others who need to hear this message. Subscribe to stay informed about stories that matter. And remember that each of us has the power to make a difference in creating a more just and equitable world for everyone. The fight for equality continues in countless small moments and individual Choices that collectively shape the society we live in and the legacy we leave for future generations.